How did the community college system in North Carolina really get going? First, we have to look back and see what happened at the national level. As World War II came to a close, President Truman, himself a World War I veteran, felt a great need to educate and train the millions of veterans who would be coming home. So he called upon President Herbert Hoover, and they came to be called the Hoover Commission. Out of that commission came the term community college. The idea was to put a college within half an hour's travel of every person in the country, so that the veterans could live at home and go to school at the community college, and so on. So further, the community college term is to serve the community within that area and adjust its curriculum accordingly. So it was. In 1953, Representative Roy Taylor from Buncombe County introduced a bill to create the community college system. But the private colleges in the state, Mars Hill, Campbell, Brevard, and others like it, felt it was going to destroy them, and so the bill failed. Also, the state superintendent had his eyes on the governorship, and he opposed that particular move. So it went down the drain. But also in 1953, Governor William B. Unstler became governor, and he learned about the great work that Dallas Herring was doing down in Dupin County to transform the schools down there. And so he named Dallas to the State Board of Education. Dallas met the chairman of the board, Lieutenant Governor Hodgins, who was ex officio sort of chairman of the board. And those two became friends because they were manufacturers. Hodges cotton and Herring caskets, the CNC. And so they became very good friends. In November '54, Umstead died and Hodges became governor. Well, that elevated Dallas Herring in terms of being able to talk then directly to the governor and so on. The '56 election came along, and he persuaded Lieutenant Governor Barnhart not to go after the chairmanship, and he prevailed upon the state board members to name Dallas chairman in 1957. And so Dallas Herring served as chairman of that board for 20 years, from 1957 to '77, and I would say no greater progress has been made in the public school, nor in higher education, than in those 20 years in North Carolina. But backing up for a moment, Hodges, immediately becoming governor, got with Dallas, and they proposed to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly accepted 5 public junior colleges in the state. They were located at Little City, Wilmington, Asheville, and 2 in Charlotte, 1 for whites and 1 for blacks, and so on. In the '55 session, strictly academic public junior colleges. But by 1957, 2 years later, Herring and Hodges had gotten together, and here's the man I'm talking about right here, Dallas Herring, a philosophy major from Davidson College, but a great advocate for the public schools, and of all things, a casket maker, and a bachelor would be the champion of the public schools. But that was Dallas Herring, a wonderful guy. But at any rate, Herring and Hodges got together, and they proposed a bill to the legislature to create the IECs. That was in the '57 session. And as Herman Porter, who is here with me today, tells me that the state board got the first one started in the spring of 1958. I believe the first one was up at Leaksville Spray, today known as Eden, and so on. But the star of the IECs was at Burlington, and a fellow named Wade Martin, who was head of vocational education, he championed the one at Burlington and got legislators, congressmen, governors, anybody else of influence to come to see that particular institution. So it was, and then in '59 more were added, and so as Hodges' term came to an end, Sanford prevailed in the governor's race. Let me tell you about that 1960 governor's race. It was Terry Sanford running against a segregationist, Dr. Beverly Lake. And Terry had one thing: education, education, education. I'm going to do what I can to improve the public schools of this state. The genesis for that had gotten started when Dr. I.E. Rita came to Raleigh, the state board, with Dallas's leadership, got Dr. I.E. Rita down from Roanoke Rapids, he was superintendent of schools there, to start a study of the high school curriculum in the summer of 1958. And so Dr. Rita and a limited staff began that study of the public school high school curriculum. By the way, they found out that the senior year in high school was the most ineffective, wasted year of the 4-year program in the high school. And a fellow named Raymond Porter was quickly named his assistant, his research assistant. And together they worked to improve the public schools of this state until 1961, when Terry Sanford became governor. He pushed hard for the public schools. And let me tell you a story. They wondered how the finance was going to be made. They struggled with it. He and his revenue commissioner, Bill Johnson. And so at 3 o'clock one afternoon, he had a scheduled conference with all the newspaper editors of the state, the Raleigh paper, the Elizabeth City, the Charlotte Observer, Winston-Salem Journal, Greensboro Daily News, etc., and so on. At 2 o'clock, they still hadn't made the decision. So he went before this bunch of editors with some handwritten notes, and he sold them on the idea. All across this state, there was editorial support for his package to support the public schools. They came to call him Bert, Brent, and Terry, stood for taxes in North Carolina. So 2 days after that session was over, he brought Bill Friday, president of the university. At that time, there were branches at Chapel Hill, Raleigh, and Greensboro, 3 branches of the university. He brought Bill Friday and Dallas Herring to the governor's mansion. He had named me his education assistant, and so on. It was Governor Hodgins, by the way, who brought me to Raleigh. He wanted me to go about the state and organize citizens in every county of the state to talk about how we can improve schools rather than fight the order of the Supreme Court on desegregation. That was my job until Terry came on and he asked me to be his education assistant. And so early after the 61 session, he brought Dallas and Bill Friday over to the governor's mansion, says, Raymond, get over there and be there when they come and tell them I'll be there shortly. And in about 3 or 4 hours, they named the Carlisle Commission to study education beyond the high school, named after Judge Irvin Carlisle of Winston-Salem. And Governor Sanford wanted 2 other people on, Cliff Blue from Moore County and Tom Woodard from Wilson County. Both of them were seeking to be speaker in the 1963 session. He said, aha, one of them will win and I'll have a friend in the speakership. And so it went. Well, at any rate, Dallas Herring and Bill Friday, president of the university, they really put the commission together, except for those 3. And the governor challenged them to go to work, give me a recommendation before the end of next year, 1964. So in November 64, they came forward with the recommendation. Herman Porter and Dr. Rita did a great deal of research with Dr. Hamilton, I believe it was, at NC State, who said, where should the community colleges best be located? Where should it in technical schools be best located? And this sort of thing. So they made their information available to that Carlisle Commission. Dr. Rita over here is one of the spark plugs, I think the one who hasn't been heralded enough to be involved with the community colleges of North Carolina. And so the commission came forward with this report, and the governor said to me, okay, get Rita, A.C. Davis, the head of finance for the state board, and Gerald James, who was vocational technical director in the Department of Public Instruction. Get them over here and let's talk. Out of that meeting said, you fellas go and draft a bill using the recommendation of that Carlisle Commission. And as I remember, Dr. Rita took care of curriculum, A.C. Davis finance, and Gerald James vocational technical education, and I the governing part of it. We put it together, and a fellow named Alan Markham, who was staff attorney there with the department, put in the legal eyes, and we turned it over to the governor. He added a few comments, and then he said to me, it's your baby, deliver it. So I had to push it through the legislature. Representative Gordon Greenwood from Asheville, Buncombe County. He led the fight in the House, along with Hugh Johnson from Dallas Heron's home county, and Ed Wilson up in Caswell County, and some others. There was just one vote in the House against it. A school teacher named, what the heck was his name?
Scotland County.
Yeah, he was from Scotland County. I can see him right now. He drank enough coffee for all the coffee people in North Carolina. But anyway, he opposed it, feeling still that it would hurt the two-year private colleges in the state. With that one vote, the community college passed in May of 1963 to become effective July the 1st. On July the 2nd, a group from Moore County came, and that group included the Speaker of the House, Clifton Blue, and one of the leaders in the Senate, Senator Bill Saunders. We want the first one to be located in Moore County. There's no school or training area anywhere within 40 or 50 miles of us. And the state board said, okay, if you'll meet the requirements, so it will be. And those requirements were that a county who wanted a community college had to pass a bond issue for buildings and also a tax levy to support maintenance and operation of the buildings and so on. And so, in effect, the first community college commissioned by the state board was the Sandhills. But going back to that original act now, 55, the school, the two-year public junior college in Elizabeth City was converted to College of Albemarle, a community college, which you know today. The two schools in Charlotte were converted into Central Piedmont Community College, and at the same time they created Charlotte College. And in that same bill, they elevated Wilmington College to a four-year status and Asheville College to a four-year status. Well, Bill Friday made a great mistake. He wanted the NC State name, the NC State University of the University of North Carolina at Raleigh. Senator Ralph Scott, who was the leader in the state senate, said, "Over my damn dead body." And the fight was on between Leo Jenkins at East Carolina, Bill Clemens at Appalachian, and Paul Beard at Western Carolina on one hand, and Bill Friday on the other. The fight mostly was for money. But anyway, that went on until 1971, when Bob Scott became governor, and he had a bill put in to name NC State University, period. The Board of Governors was created. Bill Friday was named president of the Board of Governors, and he stayed on until, I don't know, 10 or 15 years after that. But with that passage, then for the next 6 months, my job was to go about the state, primarily at legislators' request, to meet with interest groups. What can we do to get a community college in our county? And so I went from one end of the state and talked with them. As I recall, at least 20 or 25 of the institutions, I know I made a personal visit to that county for eventual their location and so on. From Cherokee way up beyond in the mountains, all the way down to Carteret on the coast and so on. And so the community colleges from that point began to spread. Dr. Rita, they turned to Dr. Rita and named him the first state director. Nobody could have been better qualified than he. Dr. Rita, this man right here, he had the wisdom of any figure you would call on in the Bible and the courage for his convictions. In a way, when Dallas would propose something, Dr. Rita would ask a question of clarity. And to be honest with you, I knew Dallas Heron very well. And Dallas would get angry at him because Dr. Rita would just simply ask a question of clarity and so on. But at any rate, they turned to Dr. Rita, and it was called Director of the Department of Community Colleges. It wasn't until 1971 that the state board, that the change was made from director to state president. But it wasn't until, what year was it, that 1981, the 79th session of the General Assembly created the State Board of Community Colleges with the leadership of Governor Jim Hunt and so on. And the State Board came to function January 1st, 1981, I believe. And since that time, from 1963 until, let me say, until 1989, I had a conversation with the legislator from Granville County, Billy, what was his name?
Watkins.
Billy Watkins. And he and Liston Ramsey were just like that in the legislature. He said, Raymond, I'm damn tired of these technical schools coming to ask for the legislative approval for community college. I said, well, Billy, he and I were classmates at Wake Forest, by the way. I said, Billy, it's an easy answer. Just make them all community colleges. He said, I will do that if we'll put into the law that they have to offer at least 51% of their work in the vocational technical area. So it was done. And now I believe everyone in the state some of them still call themselves technical. AB Tech, for example, in Asheville. Randolph Tech might be called still Randolph Tech. I know Caldwell is Caldwell Technical Institute and Community College, but all of them are now community colleges in the system. And the last report I received, there was something 800,000 or 900,000 citizens in North Carolina who took at least one course last year. In fact, I am astounded. Right here at Wake Tech Community College, last year they opened their doors to 75,000 students who took at least one course, head count. Not full-time equivalent, but 75,000. Think of that, 75,000 in this county came to this institution or around these counties to get education today. That's the appeal to community college. Serve your community, have an open door. We would admit anybody who comes in and says, I want to learn. And the faculty, they are asked to be dedicated to teaching those students how to learn. And to me, that's a great success of the community college. Now they offer new industry training. Every county in the state, when they go after new industry, what training programs can we offer at the community college in order to enhance us? And it's a big economic boom all over this great state. To me, as Terry Sanford said, it was the greatest thing he did while he was governor. I will say that it's the greatest thing in my lifetime in education in North Carolina. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. Come on up here, Herman, you may want to ask something.
You're looking at the two living people who observed, and he was very active. I was active sort of as a research analyst, and I contributed, but it was low key.
A whole lot more than he's willing to admit.
But we're the only two living in 2017 who really know what went on in the very beginning. And I started a year before when Wade Martin was the director, as he mentioned in his remarks. Wade Martin was the director of IECs. Having taught in Leaksville, Spray, and got to know Hodgins at that time, and it was really between them two, I think, that Wade knew there were area vocational schools federally funded. So he knew that we could get some area vocational schools, no doubt, and he got with Hodgins, who he provided training for when Hodgins was president of one of the textile. Marshall
Field, that's correct.
So they really, I think, had the idea, and then Dallas Herring, of course, on the board, took it up, and then the board named them Industrial Education Center.
And he and Hodgins became just like that. I believe people have told me Wade Martin and Luther Hodgins were some kind of blood relationship. They were maybe not niece or nephew, but close kin in some way. And so, but Wade Martin, who the governor of South Carolina lured away with a tremendous salary boost, went down there and so on. But Wade Martin did a great deal to get the whole idea of vocational technical education started through the Industrial Education Center. Let me point out one thing about it. These schools were located in high schools and offered classes from 4 o'clock until 10 in the high school shops and the vocational areas of the high school. And the state put in extra equipment money to enable these adults to take advantage of it. So much so that in 1963, Bill Wagner in New Hanover and Reed Ross in Fayetteville and John Huff up at Rockingham County, they opposed the creation of the community college system that would take those shops away from them and put in new shops. But their opposition was overcome. They weren't in the legislature.
Wade Martin was so involved in and committed to vocational technical education that he thought it was an imposition to bring in academic studies. He wanted that featured.
That's right.
Fortunately, we had that as our base, and we continue to have vocational technical as our base. But he decided that community college is what for him, and the governor of South Carolina pursued it and got him to head up their program, and he did a great job starting there in South Carolina, same way as North Carolina, but they too eventually expanded to the comprehensive community college.
But you know, I think Dallas Heron being a philosophy major from Davidson College and Dr. Rita having his doctorate degree from the University of South Carolina, they saw the need for academic education, and they wanted these technicians to learn to speak and write English language. They wanted them to learn that. They wanted them to learn a little bit about the past history of this nation and world. And so they put in those courses. And I remember at Sandhills, in our nursing program, we required our students, our nursing students, to take the regular English course. And they took the regular science courses, and then they adapted those science courses as they went into the field, beginning to work and so on. So that's the genius of the system.
Well, in conclusion, I want to make this statement. Last year, we have this annual luncheon for community college founders, old timers of the community college system. And Raymond Stone gave an outstanding speech, and it was on tape, but I won't get into detail. The tape was lost. So this is a reproduction, somewhat, of last year's. He did an outstanding job last year, and he has today for us as well.
You mean I've reproduced a baby?
Say again?
You mean I have produced a baby?
Yes, yes, at a ripe old age. So we got him to do this again, talking to the camera and to be on tape. And as I said a while ago, he and I are the only ones around that knew what really went on. And I wanted this, what he said last year and what he's reproduced today, I wanted it on tape, I wanted it preserved, and Clark Adams, who is here with us, will see to it that it's preserved.
And I want to say one final thing. I grew up on a tenant farm about 45 miles north of here in the Depression years of the 1930s. When I finished high school, there was no money for me to go to college. I persuaded my daddy to sign me up for the Navy as soon as the Servicemen's Adjustment Act called the GI Bill was passed. And when I came out of the Navy, I went to Wake Forest College on the GI Bill, and from there I went on and got my doctorate and so on. But that really got me started, and I can say my work in community colleges and working with the two governors as I did and this sort of thing, only in America can it happen. Yeah. Only in America.